Good morning, everybody. As I prepared for this sermon, I became quite taken with this prayer from the Apostle Paul's letter to the early Christian community in Ephesus, and especially with the phrase, rooted and grounded in love. And so I spent some time thinking about what has rooted and grounded me in love. Well, God's love, to be sure, which is not that surprising given that I'm a pastor. That's pretty obvious. But as I reflected on that question while spending the last few days in California with family, I kept coming back to people. The people who have loved me before I achieved anything. The people who have walked beside me when life became difficult. And those who have reminded me who I was whenever I lost my way. And so will you now pray with me? Loving God, remind us today of the love that has carried us this far. Open our hearts to your presence among us. Help us hear your invitation to live more deeply, more courageously, and more lovingly together. Amen. So one of the things I love about this passage from Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus is that he doesn't begin with instructions. He doesn't tell the church what programs to start, what decisions to make, or how to solve their disagreements. Instead, he begins with a prayer. I pray, he said, that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, as you are being rooted and grounded in love, which is such a beautiful image, isn't it? Roots anchor and nourish us. They hold us steady through all sorts of difficulties. They deeply connect us to life and enable us to flourish. And foundations ground a structure. They keep it standing when the winds come and the earth shifts beneath it. And so Paul is saying that before anything else, before decisions, before ministries, before challenges, the church must be grounded in love. Not grounded in certainty or being right or anchored in agreement, but rooted and grounded in love. And I think this is a reminder we need to hear because we live in a world that encourages us to ground ourselves in other things. We ground ourselves in this divided country in our opinions and in our fears. We anchor ourselves in what feels familiar and comfortable. We root ourselves in what we think it means to be successful and worthy of praise. And yet Paul points us somewhere deeper. He points us to the love of God, which is so expansive that Paul runs out of dimensions trying to describe it. As he says, the breadth and length and height and depth of Christ's love. It is as though he is stretching language to its breaking point. God's love is wider than our exclusions, longer than our failures, deeper than our darkest moments, and higher than our greatest hopes. Paul is trying to describe something that simply cannot be measured. And yet, it is the very thing that holds us together. That's part of why this text feels especially fitting on this final Sunday of Pride Month. Throughout June, we have celebrated the sacred worth of LGBTQIA+ folks and the truth that every person is created in the image of God and are beloved exactly as they are. At its best, Pride is a celebration of love, a declaration that no one is beyond God's embrace and no one has to earn their belovedness. For generations, many queer people were told there was no place for them in the church. And yet over and over again, God's love proved wider than human exclusion. The church is at its best when it reflects that expansive love. When the church says not merely you are welcome here, but you belong here. God's love creates belonging and community and draws us together. But Paul is not only talking about God's love for us, but the love that we share with one another. We should remember that Paul is writing to a community and not to individuals. He prays that together with all God's holy ones, they may comprehend the love of Christ. So in other words, we learn God's love not only by receiving it, but by experiencing it through one another. We discover God's love in friendships and in acts of kindness. We know God's love through simple conversations and in people who show up when life gets hard. We experience God's love in communities that help carry us when our own strength runs low. And this week particularly, I have also been thinking about the gift of friendship. Perhaps because my oldest and dearest friend is here today. We have known each other since we were 3 years old. We went to preschool together, and then after preschool, we started kindergarten at different schools. Halfway through my kindergarten year, we moved to another part of town, and I was really afraid on my first day at that new school. Shortly after arriving, a boy walked up to me and said, "Who are you? You don't belong here." And my little 5-year-old self burst into tears. But then I looked around, and there she was, on the playground. And I felt like I could breathe again. And Tam and I have been helping each other breathe since then. We have been important parts of each other's stories throughout our lives, and we have shared great sorrow as well as great joy together. We haven't lived in the same city for over 30 years, but she is the kind of friend who, no matter how long we go without talking, we effortlessly pick up where we left off. There's never any explaining that needs to be done, as we know each other's stories by heart. And she's never heard me preach before, so it is a great gift to me that she is here today. And so in my preparation this week, I realized that the gift of friendship is one of the ways God has rooted and grounded me in love. There are seasons in my life where I feel uncertain, and there are times when I question myself. Like all of you, I have moments of heartbreak and disappointment, as well as celebration and joy. But through all of it, there has been this steady thread of friendship, the kind of friendship that reminds you who you are and grounds you in love. And I suspect that most of you have experienced the gift of this in your life as well. Perhaps it's a lifelong friend or a spouse or a partner, perhaps a sibling. Perhaps it is someone sitting in this sanctuary right now with you or worshiping with us on Zoom. Someone whose presence in your life has helped anchor you when everything else felt uncertain. These relationships are gifts, and they are holy ground because they reveal something important about God. We are not meant to journey through life alone. We are created for connection and community and love, which brings us to where we find ourselves as a congregation today. In a little while after worship, we will gather for an important congregational meeting and vote regarding the proposed land sale. Many people have devoted countless hours of prayer, study, and discernment to this process because we all care deeply about the future of this church. Some will leave today's meeting feeling hopeful, while others will leave feeling disappointed. Some may feel relief, and others will be grieving. That is often the reality when communities face difficult and significant decisions. Yet before we tally the votes, Paul's words invite us to ask a deeper question. What is the foundation beneath whatever decision is made? What grounds us together? Because ultimately, the future of this church does not depend solely on a piece of property. The future of this church depends on whether we remain rooted and grounded in love. The church is not its building or its land. The church is people, gathered by God's Spirit and committed to following the way of Jesus. The church is people learning, however imperfectly, to love one another. If today's vote goes the way you hope, remain grounded in love. If it does not, remain grounded in love. Whether you leave celebrating or grieving, remain grounded in love. Because our unity does not come from unanimous opinions. It comes from our shared commitment to Christ and to one another. The truth is that every healthy family, every lasting friendship, and every faithful congregation eventually discovers that love matters more than agreement. Love is what allows us to stay at the table together and is what helps us listen. Love is what reminds us that the person across from us is not an opponent to defeat, but a beloved child of God. Love is what makes community possible. 14th century mystic Julian of Norwich understood this when she wrote, "Our life is all grounded and rooted in love, and without love we may not live." We human beings are made for love. Without it, we wither, but with it, we flourish. So perhaps Paul's prayer can become our prayer today. Not that we would all think alike, or that every challenge would disappear, or that every uncertainty would be resolved, because we really wouldn't want that anyway. But we can pray that Christ would dwell in our hearts and that we would be rooted and grounded in love. We can pray that we would discover again the breadth and length and height and depth of God's love, and that this love would become the foundation upon which we build our life together. Now, don't get me wrong, buildings matter, and land matters, and budgets matter, and votes matter. But love matters most. Long after today's vote is forgotten, people will remember how we treated one another. The legacy of this congregation will never be measured primarily by its assets, but by the ways we embodied God's love in this community and beyond. So today, as we celebrate Pride Month and as we honor the friendships and relationships that sustain us, as we prepare for an important moment in the life of the church, may we remember who we are. We are people beloved by God. We are people called into community. We are people whose life together is grounded and rooted in love. And if we can hold on to that, if we can keep returning to that foundation, then whatever lies ahead, we will face it together. We will be held securely in the love that is wider than our fears, deeper than our disagreements, and stronger than anything that could ever divide us. Thanks be to God. Amen.